Thank you for joining me tonight with CHEA Use of Knowledge is Power, and I'm Dr. Marseille Wells-Strozier. Tonight we have the wonderful guest, Mr. Dexter Clarke from Genesee Health Systems. Tonight we're going to discuss, is there really a problem in our communities with suicide? Please sit back and enjoy tonight's show.
Are you over the age of 25 and you haven't graduated from high school? Are you over the age of 30 and you're having problems with basic reading and math calculations, and you need to return to school but you're afraid of the traditional classroom setting? Are you over the age of 50 and you're having problems finding a job because you don't know how to use a computer? Well, don't worry, CHEA Adult Skills Center is here for you. We work with adults aged 25 years of age and older in basic reading, math, GED prep, and computer training. So please give us a call today because CHEA is here to help you.
Hi, thank you for joining me, audience, where tonight my guest is Mr. Dexter Clarke from Genesee Health Systems. Tonight we're going to have a conversation. Is suicide a problem in our community? So Mr. Dexter Clarke, thank you so very much for joining me on tonight.
Well, it's a pleasure being here.
Can you tell me a little bit about your background with Genesee Health Systems?
Yes, I am a social worker. I've been with Genesee Health System for about 37 years. I worked as a supervisor for case management. Currently, I'm a manager for community engagement. So what we're working on is trying to partner with other agencies and organizations to provide services.
Okay. Alrighty. So tonight we're going to talk about suicide in our communities, and we're going to look at suicide in the African American community. So suicide, what is really going on in our communities as a whole with suicide?
Well, one thing that we're realizing, a few years ago, University of Toledo did a study where from the year 2001 to 2017, they saw a 60% increase of suicides among our African American males. So that was pretty alarming. Suicide is the number 10 leading cause of death in the United States.
And what does it lead to, or where does it stem from for them to decide to want to commit suicide?
Well, it stems from a variety of different issues. People that may be dealing with mental illness, they may be dealing with medical illnesses, they may be dealing with financial or relationship problems. It's so many different stressors in the environment where people come to a point where they think that death is the only way out.
Is there a certain age group of the men that they find that are committing suicide?
Well, statistics, CDC shows that primarily it's the white males. 60% of all suicides are done by middle-aged white males. But we are seeing an increase in other minorities. Now, after the white males, there's the American Indians and also the Alaskan Natives. They come number 2 and 3 as far as the high number of suicides.
Wow. So in Genesee County, do you know what the rate is of black men committing suicide?
I'm not sure of the rate of that, but we are seeing an increase in that. And what has happened is that we have partnered with a local church in Flint and the Genesee Sheriff's Department because they have noticed that we are seeing more and more individuals, young people, between the ages of 15 to 24 that are looking at suicide as being an option to deal with their problems.
And with community mental health, how do they service these individuals who have attempted suicide? So you still have an opportunity to serve these individuals. What kind of services does Genesee Health System provide? Well,
the most important thing is that people have to be willing to talk about it and to admit that they need it, just like with mental health. Problems. You have to realize that you need assistance. Once that happens, then what we would do is that we would link them up if they need counseling, if they need therapy, if they need medication, because a lot of times people that are suicidal may be suffering from depression. And as I stated earlier, dealing with financial problems, relationship problems, self-esteem, there's so many issues. So there's no one particular way or means of why people are committing suicide. It's a various reasons why.
Are there any, shouldn't say symptoms, are there any warning signs that someone can be paying attention to of a family member who may be considering suicide? Are there any type of warning signs that we should pay attention to?
Yes, if you notice a sudden change in their behaviors, you know, if they're a very happy and outgoing personality and then all of a sudden they get withdrawn or seem to be depressed or they lose interest in things that they used to like doing, you know, and maybe they used to like socializing with family or doing things. If you notice that that has stopped or they seem to isolate themselves, if they seem to be irritable, and just like, short fuse. These are usually symptoms and signs that you may want to pay attention to. If they start giving away their possessions, things, maybe somebody that has things that they really treasured, and the next thing they're giving them away, or they start talking and ruminating or talking a lot about death or talking about guns and weapons and things of that nature, then these are usually some signs. Now, it's not always necessarily a sure sign that they want to commit suicide, but these are triggers or flags that you need to be aware of.
What is the method that they're using to commit suicide?
Well, statistics show that, for one thing, 50% of all suicides are done by firearms. Okay. And also, like I say, males are 3 times more lethal in committing suicide. This is talking about white, black, any. And the reason we feel that is because males usually use firearms. A female will probably use poison or something like that, but males are more committed to committing and completing suicide. So we don't usually use committed, but we use complete suicide. So they complete suicide because they're more lethal, and they'll use a gun or a firearm, while females may use poison or other things, or they may do they attempt to commit suicide, but they may not be as lethal or successful.
So if men are using more of a weapon for a gun or something, are we looking at more people with a military background and maybe PTSD that are committing suicide, or is it just...
Not necessarily. I mean, that is some. I mean, we do have veterans and things that, they come back from the war and they're overwhelmed and they can't re-engage in society. So that is a problem, that needs to be addressed. But it's not necessarily just Army, military people. It's not people with mental illness all the time. Social media is saying that, anytime there's any type of mass shootings or anything like that, that it's due to people with mental illness. That's not necessarily the case.
And we've had this before on our show about mental illness can be managed if they would take their medication and go to therapy.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. But so what we're seeing is that people are using, like say, men are 3 times more lethal because they are more determined, to commit suicide. So that's why the firearms are used. And it's not necessarily due to being a vet. It's not necessarily being poor or underprivileged, because suicide shows has no color. It's no social economic status. All walks of life. If you look recently, a lot of celebrities have committed suicide. You've seen in the news lately, and you seem to have everything going for them, but they are dealing with issues that they're not talking about it. They may be showing the symptoms, and people are not asking the question. And that is the big problem, is that people are afraid to ask the question, do you want to kill yourself? Because there's a myth that if you talk about it or ask the question, that you're going to cause people to commit suicide, and that's not the case. You need to ask that question.
Why do you think in the Black community or the African American community this hasn't been talked about much?
I think pretty much the same thing like with mental illness. For years in the Black community, we didn't want to talk about it. It was something we kept secret or kept in the family, and we didn't want because we were embarrassed. But we need to have conversations about it, and the same thing with suicide. Nobody wants to admit that their child may be thinking about suicide because that's an embarrassment. But think about it. Wouldn't it be more heartbreaking to have them commit suicide instead of talking about it and getting them the help?
That is true. You said something very profound about women. Women use drugs. So can you elaborate a little bit more on that, about women and suicide?
Well, basically, like I said, men are more determined, and like I say, the firearm is definitely a sure way, if you're going to shoot yourself or, in the head or whatever. But women, like I said, for some reason, and I don't have all the data on that, but they tend to go toward poison or, something that is not as lethal. That's why the chances of them committing suicide are a lot less than completing suicide, I should say, than a man. Because, with the poison, they may do an overdose, but someone may find them, and then, they can, get help.
Do you find that women will reach out more for help than a man?
I would say yes. I think, we have the stigma that men are supposed to be strong and they're supposed to not be sensitive and they're supposed to be able to handle anything. So we're not supposed to talk about it. But women are more open about their feelings and expressing it. And that may be why you don't see the incidence of, women as much as men, having the heart attacks and things, because they will talk about it.
That is true.
Now, now women are getting more into the mainstream of jobs with men, so you will probably start seeing more of them having some of these issues now because they're dealing with the same thing, and also with just the issues of trying to make it and having to be 2 and 3 times better than their male counterpart, which can add to stress.
Wow. So let's say that if we have someone in our family that has been contemplating suicide, we have that talk with them. What is the next step to take in order for them to receive the correct help?
Well, what you want to do when you have that talk, you want to make sure that they don't have any means to commit the suicide. If they bought a gun or something like that and they talk about that, you don't want to leave them alone, with that weapon or something, but you want to get them help. There's a suicide hotline that they can talk to. Even our agency, Genesee Health System, we have, an access and crisis line and department where you can call and we can get someone in to talk to you. And that's what you need to do. You need to get to the resources. And a lot of people feel that they're all alone and that there's no way out. And that's the problem. They feel hopeless and they feel that suicide is the only answer to their problems.
Let's talk about counseling, because that's another taboo in the Black community. They don't like counseling. Tell me the benefits of counseling, individual counseling.
Well, one thing with individual counseling, you're going to be able to tap into why you feel this way. Why do I have such a low self-esteem? Why do I feel, so stressed out? With counseling, that is going to be their job, to talk to you, find out what's causing stresses. Because a lot of times you may not identify certain things as being a stressor, but by talking it to somebody from an outside party, they can look at everything and maybe say, well, what do you think about this? Another thing with counseling is that you may find out that, there may be some other family dynamics that are going on in the family. You may find out too that, maybe Uncle Bob, had a history of depression, but we never talked about it, but, everybody kept it secret. So you may find out that, this may be something that may be, biological or, hereditary, that depression runs in my family. So that's why I feel so sad in the wintertime, and I feel so blue around the holiday time. And that would, lead the therapist to maybe recommend, okay, now we need not only therapy, but let's talk about medication to help with that, because, chemical imbalances are things that can go from family to family, and they can run in family.
That is true. Youth and suicide, is that on the increase as well? Youth committing suicide?
Oh yes, definitely. And a lot of that, like I said, the University of Toledo did a study where they saw that with the African American youth. But we are seeing a lot of youth, you hear about people on YouTube talking about that they want to take their lives, and they do that. But there's a lot of that due to bullying. In the schools and peer pressure and things. So that causes, a youth to feel that, they have no way out. And a lot of times they may not be able to talk to their parents. They may feel embarrassed about that, or not being to, open up about that. But that's why, as I talked about those different symptoms, that if you see that in a family member, you have to ask that question. Don't, shun or not ask that question, because they, are hurting. And you need to find out if they do want to commit suicide, then we need to link you with someone, You don't want to leave them alone. You want to link them to a resource. And one thing that we found out, Kevin Hines was a young man that at 19 in 2000, he jumped off the Golden State Bridge and survived that. Very few people survived that. And he has written a book, and we have even went to some of his trainings. But he said that when he jumped off that bridge, the moment that he jumped off, he regretted it and he wanted to live. So I think that a lot of people will probably feel that that's the only thing until they get to that point, and then at that moment, which many times it may be too late, they want to live.
Wow. Today I had to do a presentation on data collection, and here at the CHEA Adult Skills Center, some information that I collect is mental illness. Do you have a doctor-documented mental illness? Because we want to know actually how we can better serve you as an individual. Last week on the news, there was a conversation about a youth who committed suicide in a different state. And the school system is pushing legislation to allow teachers to have access to students' medical records, because this teacher felt as though she knew that this young man had suicidal thoughts, or that she knew that his friend had committed suicide, and this could have been the reason behind him committing suicide. They could have done something differently in school. How do you feel about medical information, such as someone is trying to commit suicide or who have tried, that information being readily available to other organizations outside of the medical institution?
Well, I think one thing, we have to be careful about protecting information. You know, we have HIPAA and other different laws that will protect that, because we want to protect the privacy and the dignity of other individuals. But I think that under certain guidelines, and if you have protected information, we should be able to coordinate with different agencies on a need-to-know basis in order to avoid that. And I think sometimes that is where the barriers come.
Yes.
Is that, you know, the school is saying that, you know, we can't talk to, you know, this person unless we talk to the parents or someone first, but you may not have enough time. You know, you want to be able to deal with it correctly. But at the same time, you want to have different protocols and things that will be effective and at the same time protect their privacy at the same.
With the water crisis here in the city of Flint, have you found an increase, or has anyone did any research to find out if our teenagers have been affected by the water when it comes to possibly wanting to commit suicide, about a chemical imbalance?
Well, one thing, and we're still in the process, we were told that it may be anywhere from 5 to several years before we really see the impact of children that consume the water with the lead. But one thing that we do know is that if they have been affected by the lead, that you're going to see a change in behavior, more aggressive behaviors, more issues in school and things like that. So I'm saying that that is going to happen. That's why right now, you know, Genesee Health System and Hurley Medical Center and other places are working on addressing and providing assessments to monitor and make sure that if we start seeing those signs, that we can address those.
Okay. Is there services within the school that is doing this, or is it the parents' responsibility to take their kids to some type of counseling services, those who've been exposed to the lead?
Well, I know that as an agency, you know, we have provided, and I know Hurley has worked on, if they see someone that has a high lead content, that they make referrals to the different agencies, and we've received funding, you know, for Flint that will help with that, educating and also how to eat and diet, and also to do an assessments to see that we do start seeing those symptoms. So I believe that the school will be part of that, being aware of that, but also the physicians and doctors and health clinics are very cognizant and aware that, you know, we know that this is a potential problem. So they're being aware and they're on notice, you know, to if they see that symptom, to refer them to the needed services.
Okay. One more time for our viewers, can you run down a list of some of the things we need to pay attention to if a person is contemplating suicide?
Okay, one thing, if they start to isolate themselves, if you start seeing a drastic change in their behavior where either they get very agitated, irritated, where they start giving up possessions, if they start fixating on things about death, they start talking about weapons and things of that nature, or if they feel overwhelmed and very depressed and feel like, you know, it doesn't matter if I'm here anyway. When you start seeing things like that, or drastic change in their behaviors and things of that nature, or giving away possessions that they, you know, used to like and really held on to, then those are usually some signs that there could be a potential of them wanting to commit suicide, and that's when you have to ask the question.
Okay. One more thing before we go to break. Video games. I know President Donald Trump is saying that the video games is not behind a lot of youth crimes. I have heard, of course I haven't done the reading myself, that in Japan or China, where they really play the video games, they actually have therapy, counseling sessions for a lot of these youth, because suicide is high over there because of the video games. Again, this is only hearsay. I haven't read it for myself, so please read it for yourself. Do you think video games can contribute to suicidal thoughts and actual suicide?
I believe that anything that we watch, things that are violent nature or whatever, can influence our thoughts. Now, once again, can it make you think about suicide? It may make it look, like something that's the answer or pleasurable. Sometimes Hollywood fantasize different things, and I know there's a movie on that talks about, I think, 13 ways or steps, where this person that committed suicide, and they talked about the different steps and things,
Wow.
where it glamorizes
Yes.
suicide. So I think we have to be careful, not only for suicide, but violence or anything. If we watch enough of that, you think about the shootings at the theater when they did the Batman.
Batman, yes.
Where he fantasized and actually felt that, he was that villain. So I would say anything that we watch can influence. Now, is that going to be the thing that makes you commit suicide? Not necessarily, but you have to look at what they're dealing with. If it's depression, if they're dealing with self-esteem and other issues, but that may be something that may contribute to it.
Are you over the age of 25 and you haven't graduated from high school? Are you over the age of 30 and you're having problems with basic reading and math calculations, and you need to return to school but you're afraid of the traditional classroom setting? Are you over the age of 50 and you're having problems finding a job because you don't know how to use a computer? Well, don't worry, CHEA Adult Skills Center is here for you. We work with adults aged 25 years of age and older in basic reading, math, GED prep, and computer training. So please give us a call today because CHEA is here to help you.
What other information you'd like to share with us?
Well, like I said, there is a suicide hotline that you can always call, 1-800-273-8255. 24 hours a day that you can call and, talk to someone. And also at Genesee Health System, we also have a text line that you can call. If you text 741-741 in Flint, that we can, just talk to people about that.
Okay. Where is Genesee Health System in Genesee County?
Our main campus is at 420 West 5th Avenue, on the corner of 5th Avenue and Grand Traverse, right next to Early Hospital. That's our main campus.
In the city of Flint. Are you outside of the city of Flint at all?
We do have some satellites, but basically we're located in Flint, but we do serve Genesee County.
Okay.
So,
and the name change. Let's go with the name change because Genesee Health System used to be Community Mental Health.
Right.
That's why I always get them twisted up. So, tell us about the name change and when did it take place?
Well, several years ago, we realized that, we have to look at more than just the mental health of an individual. It's a holistic approach. You have to look at not only the mental, but the physical health as well, and the social health. So that's why we changed not only our name, but our mission statement to encompass everything, the mental aspect, but also the social and the physical aspect of that.
Is there a certain geographical location where there's more suicide? Well, I'm going to ask you two questions. Is there a certain location in the United States where they have done research and more men or women are committing suicide in those areas?
Well, the University of Toledo, that study that talked about the African American males, they found out that in Georgia, that had one of the highest, recently,
okay.
For suicides there.
And that's a black males?
Black young males, right.
The overall health department moved down to that area. And we do know that there is a lot more gay black males, transgender black males. Was that some of the things that they found out about the men who committed suicide, that they were experiencing, how can I put it? Was it part of the homosexuality and all of these things that's normally a tattoo of the black community? They're being open about their sexual identity, and traditionally in the black community that's not accepted. Could that be a reason behind the increase of suicide in the black community in Atlanta? Because of that reason in that area.
Now, the study didn't specifically state that. It did talk about just the social economic trends and the stressors, things of that nature. But we do know statistically that those that are dealing with, gender identity and things of that nature, there is an increase, there's the likelihood of committing suicide much higher because of the same thing, bullying and things like that, dealing with the pressure, not being accepted by family. So once again, that common denominator deals with the whole idea of, finding support or, feeling that you're, that's not worth living, or not having support or being able to talk to somebody.
How about the certain time of a year or a season? Is suicide higher during the summertime or holidays?
Well, one thing we do know is that people get more depressed, that suffer from seasonal affective disorder around the holidays and things of that nature, or when there's less sunlight and things of that nature. I think that does contribute to. Now, whether or not it increases even more so, I don't have that data, that statistic, but like I say, we have seen recently an increase in several of the nations, I think 23 of the states in the United States, that have seen an increase in their states of suicide.
Wow. And what about Michigan?
Michigan that has an increase in it too.
Wow.
There's one of the states.
Thank you so much for being on the show. The resource information that was presented to you by Mr. Clarke will be available on our closing credits. And if you have any additional questions, please make sure you give CHEA Adult Skills Center a phone call. Tonight, we want to say thank you, and hopefully we'll see you on next week. So please sit back and wait. Please sit back and enjoy tonight. Let's see. Thank you for joining me. Nope. Start do some.
All right, I got you. I'll count us down.
Thank you. Dexter looking at me too. Go ahead.
3, 2.
Because of, and don't put this on TV yet, because this is gonna be, I need to think a moment, so you know this is gonna be edited out. I'm gonna see how I can word this one.
Okay.
So, any last questions? No, I said that wrong. What kind of apps can I use in order to help me create a budget?
There are a number of apps. In fact, wherever you bank has an application. So start with the app that your own bank offers. And if you have the opportunity to have more than one bank, Flagstar Bank should be one of them.
Knowledge isn't power, it's the use of the knowledge. That's where the power lies.